In this video, I'm going to look at every NFL team's worst free agent signing of all time. Strap yourselves in and get ready to go right after this short break. Before I begin, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, Factor. Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. Their team of gourmet chefs create each meal using only ingredients with integrity to help you feel your best all day long. Eat stress-free this summer with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian-approved, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from a weekly menu of 35 options, including popular options like Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Veggie. Also, discover more than 60 add-ons every week, like breakfast, on-the-go lunch, snacks, and beverages to help you stay fueled and feel good all day long. So what are you waiting for? Get started today and fuel up for your springtime goals. When things get hectic, Factor is flexible. Change your order up every week with plans from 4 to 18 meals per week, or pause or reschedule your deliveries anytime. I've said it in all the other ads that I've done for Factor, and it's 1000% true. They are the real deal. They have my complete and total endorsement, so if you're on the fence about it, you shouldn't be. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50berry to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50berry at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Arizona Cardinals, Sam Bradford, 2018. Heading into 2018, the Cardinals drafted Josh Rosen in the first round, and Sam Bradford was supposed to be his quote-unquote mentor, and considering how Rosen's career turned out, I guess Bradford did a pretty good job. The Cardinals had signed Bradford to a 2-year, $20 million contract with $15 million of that guaranteed for 3 games where Bradford threw for 2 touchdowns and 4 interceptions and went 0-3, posting terrible numbers across the board. Bradford would never again play a single down in the NFL, but he got his money because his agent is literally the greatest agent in the history of anything. Atlanta Falcons, Kirk Cousins, 2024. Here's one that you guys all remember probably. The Falcons signed Cousins in free agency after he left the Vikings to a massive 4-year, $180 million contract with $100 million guaranteed. They then followed this up by drafting a quarterback in the first round, Michael Penix. At the time, everyone had the side eye for the move as if it didn't make sense. But now, after Cousins in his 1 year with Atlanta ended up being pretty mediocre at best, the Falcons turned the reins over to Penix, although surprisingly, Cousins is still on the roster as of this video and will be the backup quarterback. Pretty expensive backup quarterback, if you ask me. The Falcons paid him to be a difference maker, and instead they just got more of the same, which was losing. Buffalo Bills, Derek Dockery, 2007. How many of you who aren't Bills fans even know who Derek Dockery is? Well, fuck it. Even if you are a Bills fan, you probably don't even know who Derek Dockery is because he was a long time ago. And a long time ago, the Bills signed the massive offensive lineman to a 7-year, $49 million contract with $18 million guaranteed. That was a lot of money in 2007. It still is, really. For him to be the anchor and cornerstone of their gigantic offensive line for years to come. Instead, what happened and what followed was 2 mediocre seasons where Dockery's play was inconsistent, and then they released him 2 years into his 7-year deal. I would say that's money not well spent. Baltimore Ravens, Elvis Grbac, 2001. The logic here makes sense. The Ravens were coming off of a Super Bowl win with Trent Dilfer, who everybody and their mom knew was just a game manager, and Elvis Grbac was coming off of a very good season in Kansas City. So the Ravens, using transitive property, thought, hey, we won a Super Bowl with a terrible quarterback. We're going to dominate and easily win the Super Bowl if we upgrade a quarterback with Elvis Grbac, and that's not what happened at all. Grbac signed a 5-year, $30 million contract, and the Ravens got just 1 season out of him where he threw more interceptions than touchdowns, and they ended up losing in the divisional round of the playoffs. Grbac would then retire after the 2001 season at the age of 31. Now look, I'm not saying the Ravens would have gone on to be a dynasty if they had kept Trent Dilfer, but I think if they had known how badly the Grbac situation was going to turn out, they probably would have just stuck with Dilfer due to camaraderie. Maybe. I don't know. It's the Ravens. Who knows what they do? Carolina Panthers, Chuck Smith, 2000. It's a pretty easy one. Panthers signed star defensive lineman Chuck Smith from the Falcons in 2000 to a 5-year, $21 million contract with $4.5 million guaranteed. Again, this was a lot for a defensive lineman back in 2000. And what did they get out of Chuck Smith? They got 1 tackle and 2 starts. That's it. Yes, 1 tackle and 2 games started before Chuck Smith's injuries started to hit. Nobody really remembers this signing, or it's not really talked about, probably because it was that bad and irrelevant. God damn, only 2 games? That's a tough scene. Cincinnati Bengals, Antonio Bryant, 2010. Now, you're probably wondering why there's no stat sheet for Antonio Antonio Bryant on his particular slide, that's because he never played a single game with the Cincinnati Bengals. Now you say to yourself, well, that's not a big deal. There's tons of players every year that sign and never end up playing a game for the team they sign. They get cut in training camp. It's a part of the business. Well, most of them don't sign a 4-year, $28 million contract with $8 million guaranteed before they get cut, before ever playing a game with the team. And that's exactly what happened with Bryant. So that's right. The Bengals essentially paid Antonio Bryant $8 million to never play a game for them and practice once before he got hurt, and they released him before training camp. That basically sums up the Bengals. Cleveland Browns, Andre Rison, 1995. Heading into 95, Andre Rison was having one of the best young careers of any receiver ever. His best years came with the Atlanta Falcons, famously, and also his girlfriend, Lisa Left Eye Lopez, burned his house down. But that's not really relevant here. Although maybe in a way it is, because this signing was the equivalent of burning your entire franchise down. Literally. Heading into 95, the Browns were fresh off of a playoff appearance and the number one defense, and they felt that maybe one more weapon, like Andre Rison, was going to be the difference between them having another divisional round exit and winning the Super Bowl. And it made sense. That's why they doled out a 5-year, $17 million contract with $5 million guaranteed. Again, for 1995, this was record-setting. Not only would Andre Rison's production in his 1 year with Cleveland be terrible, it was also a big reason why the Browns literally moved away from Cleveland, or at least that's what Art Modell says, because his spending spree, according to Modell, and I know he's full of shit, but still, he said that paying Rison so much money was a big reason why he couldn't afford to keep the lease and keep the Browns in Cleveland, blah, blah, blah. So not only was Rison a terrible player, but his signing ended up partially being responsible for the Browns literally going extinct, at least for 4 years. Chicago Bears, Mike Glennon, 2017. Good Lord, look at his neck. Jesus Christ, it's huge. Anyway, but Jesus, look at that thing. It's a monster. The Bears, similar to the Cardinals in 2018 with Sam Bradford and Josh Rosen, paid a shitload of money to Mike Glennon to be their bridge quarterback to quote-unquote mentor their first-round pick from that same season, Mitch Trubisky. But what about Glennon? How did he himself perform for the Bears? Well, they paid him 3 years, $45 million with $18.5 million guaranteed, and in return, they got 4 starts with 4 touchdowns and 5 interceptions and a 1-3 record. And ironically, the one win that he had was against a Pittsburgh team that went 13-3. Just like, again, with Bradford and Rosen, I guess Glennon's mentorship is a big reason why Mitch Trubisky ended up being a shitty quarterback. But still, $18.5 million for 1 year and 4 starts? I'll sign up for that. Dallas Cowboys, Mike Vanderjagt, 2006. You're not going to see a lot of kickers make this list, but Vanderjagt is the exception. Famous for his chokes in the postseason with the Indianapolis Colts and for being an asshole, the Cowboys dished out a lot of money to Vanderjagt for a kicker. 3 years, $4.5 million with $2.5 million guaranteed. They expected him to solidify their position, obviously, and that's not what happened. Vanderjagt ended up missing some crucial field goals and lasted just 10 games with the Cowboys before they released him. And remember, this was the same year the Cowboys ended up losing in the wildcard round on a snap that was bobbled by Tony Romo on a field goal. I just think it's ironic that they spent a shitload of money on their kicker, and that's how they ended up losing that year in the postseason, because they couldn't make a 19-yard field goal. The Cowboys are so hilarious. Vanderjagt would never play in the NFL again after this. Denver Broncos, Juwan James, 2019. If you weren't paying close attention to the Broncos during their lean years after winning Super Bowl 50, you probably never even heard of this contract. But rest assured, it did happen, and it was very, very bad. The Broncos signed James to 4 years, $51 million with $32 million guaranteed. They expected him to be one of the best tackles in the league, obviously, and what they got out of him for the duration of that contract? 3 games. 3 games. He started 3 games in 2019, and then he got hurt, and then the next year he opted out, and then he tore his Achilles the year after that. So yes, 3 games, $32 million. That's legalized bank robbery right there. Detroit Lions, Trey Flowers, 2019. It was either Flowers or Scott Mitchell from way back in the day, although Mitchell's 1995 season kind of disqualifies him from being the worst, in my opinion, because he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league that year. Flowers, on the other hand, after a stint in New England, signed a massive deal. 5 years, $90 million with $50 million guaranteed. And his first season in Detroit was respectable, I guess, with 7 sacks and 21 quarterback hits, but still not elite compared to what he was getting paid. And then his final 2 years in Detroit, he played 14 games combined and had 3.5 sacks. So overall, the Lions gave $50 million guaranteed and a 5-year deal to Trey Flowers for 10.5 sacks and 29 games. So yes, I would say that was not money well spent. Green Bay Packers, Martellus Bennett, 2017. It was either Bennett or Jimmy Graham, who the Packers signed to free agency the next season. And although Graham was a disappointment in Green Bay, at least he was liked by his teammates. Martellus Bennett lasted just 7 games with the Packers after signing a 3-year, $21 million contract with $6.3 $6.3 million guaranteed. But the reason he makes this list is because he was hated by everybody in Green Bay. He said that his shoulder was bad and he had to quit, and that the Packers team doctor forced him to play, which prompted outrage from basically every other longtime Pack player, and it was pretty messy. And then, after he got cut by the Packers, he went to the Patriots that same year and played a couple games before finally getting surgery. It just was not a good look for him. His career would end shortly after. Houston Texans, Brock Osweiler, 2016. A pretty easy one here. Osweiler sat behind Peyton Manning for 4 years and, ironically enough, did actually play a big part in the Broncos winning it all in 2015. I don't know about big part, actually, but he did somewhat earn his ring, is what I'll say, in 2015, even if he was on the bench for all the playoff games. Either way, the Texans signed him based off of potential and also because he's really, really tall. He's like 6'8". Anyway, they signed him to a 4-year, $72 million contract with $37 million guaranteed. You're getting paid like an elite quarterback, and instead, he ended up throwing more interceptions than touchdowns. But thanks to Houston's amazing defense, they made the playoffs and they got to the divisional round before they got destroyed by the eventual champion Patriots, and Osweiler was cut after the season, and then the Deshaun Watson era began in Houston, which is complicated in its own right, but still very similar to the Elvis Gerbach signing by the Ravens, in my opinion. Indianapolis Colts, Devin Funchess, 2019. In 2018, the Colts made the playoffs with Andrew Luck, and it seemed like they were looking to give him another weapon, and Devin Funchess, after some respectable seasons with Carolina, was seen as a guy who could take the game and the Colts to the next level offensively, which in hindsight is hilarious. Although, to be fair, nobody saw Luck retiring for the season in 2019, but still, when the Colts gave him a 1-year, $10 million contract, I think they expected more than just 1 game and 3 catches, which is what Funchess gave them, and then he never played another down in the NFL. Not the worst or most unforgivable contract on this list, but still pretty bad. Kansas City Chiefs, Chester McLaughlin, 1998. In 1997, the Chiefs had the best defense in the league and went 13-3, although they choked in the playoffs like they usually did back then. They thought that snatching away the all-pro defensive tackle from their rival Oakland would take them to another level, and that's not what happened. McLaughlin, who again was an all-pro and Pro Bowler in Oakland, did not come close to reaching that height in Kansas City for whatever reason. He played 3 seasons on a 5-year, $30 million contract, and he gave the Chiefs 7 sacks in 3 years. And also, after going 13-3 in 97, the Chiefs did not make the playoffs in any of McLaughlin's 3 years, while their defense declined. So yes, I would say this was not money well spent once again, but I don't think it's as bad as the Las Vegas Raiders signing Javon Walker in 2008. Walker had had an up and down career. To that point, he had showed flashes of potential with Packers, and the Broncos had a couple 1,000-yard seasons. And so the Raiders, with their young first overall pick at quarterback, Jamarcus Russell, what a class act, decided to sign Walker to a 4-year, $55 million contract with $16 million guaranteed, paying him like one of the best receivers in the league. And what they got out of him was 2 seasons, 11 games, 15 catches, and 1 touchdown, while also continuing to be one of the worst teams in the league. Now, I'm not saying that Javon Walker is the reason why Jamarcus Russell was a terrible player, because that's not the reason why, but his contract is a little bit of an insight into why the Raiders were so dog shit, and still are really, for so many years. Decades at this point, honestly. Los Angeles Chargers, J.C. Jackson, 2022. After a very successful stint with New England and a bunch of interceptions, the Chargers took the bait and signed Jackson to a massive 5-year, $82.5 million contract with $40 million guaranteed in the 2022 offseason. His tenure with the Chargers ended up being a massive disaster. In a year and a half before they traded him back to the Patriots, ironically, he appeared in just 7 games for the Chargers and recorded 1 interception. That's it. He would then play another year with the Patriots, and he has not played a down in the league since 2023, and his career might be over at this point. Los Angeles Rams, Allen Robinson II, 2022. 2022 offseason was not a great offseason for the Los Angeles NFL team. Allen Robinson had been a respectable and even very good receiver at times for the Jaguars and Bears before the Rams, fresh off of a Super Bowl victory, decided to sign Robinson to make themselves even better. They signed him to a 3-year, $46.5 million contract with $30 million of that guaranteed, and what they got out of it was 10 games, 33 catches, 339 yards, and 3 touchdowns before Robinson got hurt, and then the Rams released him after the season. The 2022 Rams also are the worst Super Bowl defending champion ever, going just 5-12. And when you look at signings like Robinson, it's not hard to see why. Jacksonville Jaguars, Nick Foles, 2019. It's ironic how some players are absolutely beloved forever by certain franchises and completely despised by others. Enter Nick Foles. As an Eagles fan, he's basically like our Jesus. But for Jaguars fans, he's more of a Judas, because after a couple very, very good years with the Eagles as the backup quarterback for Carson Wentz, which included winning a Super Bowl and Super Bowl MVP, the Jaguars spent 4 years, $91 million, with $50 million guaranteed on Foles to be their franchise quarterback, and that's just not how Foles rolls, folks. All that money guaranteed for 4 starts where he threw 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, going 0-4. Again, if you want Nick Foles to be your full-time starting quarterback, your franchise quarterback, you're going to have a bad time. But God damn it, if you need him to come in December and be your quarterback for the playoffs, then he's literally Joe Montana. It's basically like you wouldn't have Mariano Rivera being a starter, okay? Because that's not how he fits. But if you need him to just finish the job, Nick Foles is your guy, and the Jaguars misread the situation. So I'm not going to blame Big Dick Nick for this. He took the money. He's a class act. Shame on the Jaguars. This is their fault, not Nick Foles, okay? Miami Dolphins, Jake Grove, 2009. You're probably saying to yourself, who the fuck is Jake Grove? And that's exactly the point. In 2008, thanks to some injuries, the Dolphins were able to get into the postseason where they went one and done, but they still thought their shit didn't stink, so they went into free agency and tried to shore up their offensive line even more by signing Oakland's Jake Grove to a 5-year, $29 million contract with $14.5 million guaranteed at their center position, and what they got in return on that investment was 1 season with 12 games and 10 starts before injuries ended Grove's career and time with the Dolphins. Minnesota Vikings, John Carlson, 2012. Do you even know who John Carlson is? Did you know that he even played for the Vikings? And did you know that the Vikings actually gave him a 5-year, $25 million contract with $11 million guaranteed heading into 2012? You probably didn't, but now you do, and you should know, because it was basically robbery. Carlson, in return for his amazing contract, gave the Vikings 2 years for 40 catches and 1 touchdown. But hey, at least he got a front row seat in 2012 to watching Adrian Peterson run for over 2,000 yards. I guess that's worth the contract. I don't know. New England Patriots, Antonio Brown, 2019. This has nothing to do with talent, obviously, but the Patriots, at Tom Brady's urging, signed Antonio Brown despite everybody knowing that he was batshit crazy because he happens to be an all-time great Hall of Fame caliber receiver. So the Patriots took a chance on him while he was being investigated for sexual assault, and he lasted just 1 game with the Patriots, and he did catch a touchdown, and I don't have any doubts that if he stayed with the Patriots, he and Brady would have put up great numbers together, but this was a big reason why Brady ended up leaving New England, because he felt like he needed guys like Antonio Brown to get another championship, which he did, but that doesn't really reflect very good on Brady either, but so fuck Tom Brady. Anyway, so yeah, so 1 year, $15 million, $10 million guaranteed for 1 game and 1 touchdown the Patriots dished out for Antonio Brown, who is now arguably the biggest shit poster on social media. New Orleans Saints, Jarius Byrd, 2014. As it was for most of the Drew Brees era, the Saints were always looking to shore up their defense, and they thought that Jarius Byrd was going to be their guy, especially in the secondary, so they gave him a 6-year, $56 million contract with $28 million guaranteed, and instead, in 3 seasons in New Orleans, they ended up getting 3 interceptions and 0 playoff appearances, while their defenses were ranked near the bottom every single year Jarius Byrd was in uniform. And then, of course, the year he leaves New Orleans, the Saints ended up making the playoff for 4 straight years in a row, thanks in large part to a great draft in 2017. But Jarius Byrd symbolizes the latter part of Drew Brees' career, where he put up a bunch of stats and they didn't make the playoffs every year, going 7-9 because their defenses were historically bad. New York Giants, Kenny Golladay, 2021. When the Giants signed Golladay in 2021 to a 4-year, $72 million contract with $28 million guaranteed, they were banking on him continuing to improve from his impressive tenure in Detroit, and that is not what happened at all, which is hilarious. They thought that he was going to make Daniel Jones into a great quarterback. What a stupid fucking franchise. Golladay lasted all of 2 seasons in New York, catching 1 touchdown pass. Yes, $72 million, $28 million guaranteed for 1 touchdown catch, and you wonder why the Giants continue to remain a joke. Much like their other New Jersey brethren, the New York Jets, who signed Tremaine Johnson in 2018 to a 5-year, $72.5 million contract with $34 million guaranteed, and what they got out of that was 5 interceptions and 17 games in 2 years, and that's it. They paid Johnson like he was one of the best cornerbacks in the league, and he took a massive dump all over them, but hey, his bank account did not suffer, which is what really matters, I guess. Darrelle Revis, he was not. At least first tenure Darrelle Revis. Second tenure Darrelle Revis with the Jets could honestly be on here, but I decided not to out of respect for his first tenure with the Jets because I'm a classy guy. But when it comes to this next one, the Philadelphia Eagles signed Nnamdi Muga in 2011. He was supposed to be Clearly a fucking cornerstone guy. They signed him to a 5-year, $60 million deal for $25 million guaranteed after he made a couple all-pro teams in Oakland as a shutdown corner, and he was complete dog shit in 2 years with the Eagles. I mean, he was fucking terrible. He forgot how to cover people, he couldn't tackle, he barely had interceptions, and the Eagles missed the playoffs both times, both years he was there, including a 4-12 season in 2012 before the Eagles finally cut bait with him. It just what a fucking disgrace he is. And he's now an actor, but really he should be in jail for robbing the Eagles like this. It's just disgusting. Pittsburgh Steelers, Ladarius Green, 2016. This was a complete potential signing, meaning that they signed Ladarius Green based on potential after his first couple seasons with the Chargers. So they signed him to a 4-year deal worth $20 million and $4.8 million guaranteed, and their return on investment was 6 games and 1 touchdown catch. And Green had to retire because he had concussion problems, so it's not all Ladarius Green's fault, but the bottom line is that the Steelers invested a ton of money in him at a pivotal position, the tight end position, to help replace Heath Miller, and he did not come through. San Francisco 49ers, Lawrence Phillips, 1999. The contract for Lawrence Phillips wasn't that bad. It was a 2-year contract for $1.75 million, but the reason this signing was so bad was because Lawrence Phillips was a massive piece of shit. Literally, the guy was not a good person, and he got chance after chance after chance, and the 49ers continued to give him a chance in the league, thinking they were finally going to be able to fix him because he had a great college career, and despite all of his numerous off-field incidences, they gave him a chance, as if that wasn't bad enough. Another reason why he gets here is because he lasted just 8 games with the 49ers, scoring 2 touchdowns. His career would end that season. But the biggest thing and the biggest problem with the Lawrence Phillips signing was that he is largely responsible for Steve Young getting a career-ending concussion, which officially ended the 49ers dynasty for good after he missed a block early in the season, which allowed a free blitzer to go at Steve Young where he knocked him out. And so yeah, that was that. It took the 49ers like 15 years to recover after that, long after Phillips was done in a uniform. I'm sure he's looking up right now, very, very angry that I put him on here, but that's too bad. The Seattle Seahawks, Kerry Williams, 2015. Fresh off of back-to-back Super Bowl appearances with their Legion of Boom, the Seahawks got a little bit greedy. They lost Byron Maxwell in free agency, who ended up being another scrub for the Eagles. Fuck him. So they signed Kerry Williams to a 3-year, $18 million contract with $7 million guaranteed, even though at no point in his career had he showed that he was an elite cornerback. They thought that he could add their already elite defense, and outside of a fumble return for a touchdown in his first game, Kerry Williams did nothing. He lasted just 10 games with the Seahawks before they got rid of him, and although the Legion of Boom would go on to survive for a couple more years, it's misses like this that ended up being why they didn't last much longer after 2014. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Alvin Harper, 1995. This was in the early days of free agency, and Harper had been a great second option on some Super Bowl champion winning Cowboys teams, and the Buccaneers at this point thought that, hey, we got a young quarterback in Trent Dilfer who's going to be our franchise guy moving forward. Let's give him some help. So let's dish out a shitload of cash, which is what they did, which again, 4 years, $10.6 million might not sound like a lot now for a receiver, but back in 95, it was breaking the bank. And what the Buccaneers got in return for Harper was 2 seasons and 3 touchdowns and a lot of losing. So yes, Alvin Harper was a terrible signing. You don't know how badly I wish I could say Tom Brady here, but unfortunately, he did do okay in Tampa, and Alvin Harper was worse. So I have to go with Alvin Harper based on integrity. Tennessee Titans, Vic Beasley, 2020. Admittedly, this is not the worst contract on the list, but still, it's on here, so you know it was bad. The Titans signed the former first-round pick and All-Pro to a 1-year, $9.5 million contract, fully guaranteed, and in response to that, they ended up getting 5 games, 1 forced fumble, and 3 tackles before they ended up cutting him, and Beasley has never played in the NFL since, and nobody really cares about it because the Titans and they're irrelevant, I get it, but still very, very bad signing. And finally, the Washington Commanders, Albert Haynesworth, 2009. If you want to look at arguably the worst contract in NFL history, this could be it. Albert Haynesworth, after back-to-back All-Pro seasons in Tennessee, signed a 7-year, $100 million contract with $41 million guaranteed for the then Redskins. And not only was he a disappointment on the field, as he couldn't stay healthy, and he just did nothing but bitch and moan, and he failed the conditioning test, and he just insulted everybody. For $100 million and $41 million guaranteed, the Redskins got 20 games out of him and 6.5 sacks, while also being lazy as fuck. And that was always the worry about Haynesworth. He had the talent to be a Hall of Famer, but he only gave a shit during contract years, which is why when his contract years came up with Tennessee, he dominated and fooled the team into giving him a crap load of money, which is exactly what Dan Snyder did, because Dan Snyder was a fucking idiot. And if you're going to pay Albert Haynesworth $100 million, then you basically deserve what you get, and that's exactly what Washington got. Nothing.